Hey everybody, it's me, Mark Pattison, back again with another great episode of Finding Your Summit. And this week we continue our role with another fantastic guest, and her name is Dr. Emily Farkas. And Emily is a very, very unique person in from the standpoint of, number one, she's a cardiothoracic surgeon. So I think there's like 1% of the planet are female cardiothoracic surgeons. And those are the people that go in and rip open your chest, pull it open, and dive down and fix your heart, fix your lungs, and then put you back together. And the thing that makes her very unique is her humanitarian efforts around the world, being in Mongolia, Brazil, Ecuador, Nepal, Nigeria, Kenya. The list goes on and on and on. And essentially what she does is she works 2 weeks of the month in Wisconsin at a hospital. And then about 6 to 8 times during the year, she goes on these humanitarian projects all over the world, on her own nickel, going in a lot of cases, working on these little kids who can't afford it, and then comes back out. And the experiences that she's had to overcome just the challenges of being in the ER, the challenges of being kind of in a man's world as it relates to that particular profession, cardiothoracic surgery, and really thriving. And she's an inspiration to many, I think, especially with girls. I've got 2 daughters myself, so I love it when people are out there, women are out there, and they're leading the way, they're charging the way, and they're not letting any kind of barriers get in their path to greatness. And she's another one of those. So this is a fantastic episode, so tune in. And as always, we love the ratings, reviews on iTunes. This thing continues to grow, and it's so much fun having and getting comments from people that are sending me messages. So keep it coming. Love it. And here we go with Emily. Bye. Hey everybody, it's Mark Pattison back again with another awesome episode of Finding Your Summit. And this week we've got another just incredible guest, and broadcasting, I might add, from Hermosa Beach, California, World HQ. Her name is Dr. Emily Farkas. She is a doctor, of course, a humanitarian, a mountain climber, a speaker, adventurer, and a leopard owner. How about that?
Had to get that in there. Huh?
Emily, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Mark. How are you?
Oh, I'm so excited that you're here. Okay, so let's get this out of the way. I've had the good fortune of actually seeing this little leopard, and people are asking, like, what is this leopard? So let's get that out of the way. It's about 2 pounds, maybe. Not that.
I guess I can't hide from the world that I am a cat woman now that you've broadcast it here on your podcast. So yes, it's a Bengal cat, and she's about 6 pounds at the moment, 6 months old, and she's every bit the wild cat that her name implies.
Yeah, so obviously people can't actually see this cat because it's a podcast, but the great thing about this cat is that it literally has the markings of a leopard, which makes it so unique. So I don't know how that all works, but it does, and I've seen it, and it's live, and she owns it. So anyways, okay, so of course the name of this podcast is called Finding Your Summit, and so much of this is about overcoming adversity. And in your case, you're such an accomplished person, such a rock star in my mind. And the things that you do, we're going to get into. And I think what really separates you in the way I see the world is the way that you have really, integrated into a world that most women don't actually do. Not only from the profession that you have chosen, but some of the things that you have done in terms of your humanitarian efforts around the world. And that's super impressive. So let's just start back from your childhood, where you grew up, because I want to lead to how you became a cardiothoracic surgeon, which we're going to get into that in a minute. So you grew up in Pittsburgh, right? What was that like?
Well, I had a lovely childhood, in my opinion. I didn't know much different from the area that I grew up in. I actually didn't travel a lot, certainly not internationally as I was growing up. And when I got to Pepperdine for my college education, sort of opened up the world a little bit to me.
So wait. So let's back up just a little bit, because you just jumped from like 0 to 18 years old. Okay,
it was a long time ago.
Yeah, no, you're. I wanna establish your drive, because I'm going to sit here. You're a very humble person, which is one of the things I really love about you. And I'm going to ask some probably embarrassing questions to you, but at the same time, I think it's important to really understand, purpose and how you got to be the type of person that you are in terms of your internal drive. Okay, so in high school, I mean, where was it in like growing up? Is it a job that you had? Was there somebody that influenced you in a way that I want to be that person? I mean, how did you're on the East Coast, you're growing up in Pittsburgh, you go through high school, and now like presto, I want to go to Pepperdine, move all the way across the country and go to this beautiful college in Malibu. I mean, were there influences along the way? How did that happen?
Well, I grew up very creatively inclined. So I, did ballet. I was, I took art classes at a museum. I won an international writing contest when I was in third grade. I sort of had that type of mind. And so I surprised everyone when I switched gears, but myself included. But so that's sort of the context for me growing up. It was all very creative sort of endeavors. And when I, was in high school, it was just an extension of that. And to be very honest, your answer about how I ended up at Pepperdine, I'd like to say it was the academic prowess, but I was sitting in my guidance counselor's office and looking at the book bindings, and one of them said Malibu, California, and I said, that's where I'm going to go.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, that's an easy choice, right? I mean,
right.
Anybody who's been to Malibu, California, and seen the campus of Pepperdine, it kind of rolls up the hill and overlooking the beautiful Pacific Ocean. And I mean, it's just a great vibe down there, mountains in the background. And so that's certainly an easy one. So what did you study at Pep?
So I was a sports medicine major, which was not what I had originally intended. I wanted to major in dance, but my parents quickly set me straight on that decision that they weren't going to pay the college tuition it took to just be a dance major. And so sports medicine was sort of the closest thing that I could find to that, which was interesting for me. And not only did it introduce me to medicine, but I think, the biomechanics and the kinesiology and the exercise physiology probably shaped a little bit of who I've become and my desire to kind of test limits. You learn about sort of the body's ability to, to adapt or to resist or to evolve or devolve or kind of achieve, what you need to do body and mind wise, I think is part of sports medicine. And so that it kind of, I think it sort of molded my desire to kind of test limits and to see what I was capable of in both respects. So that was one aspect of sports medicine. And then of course the exposure to the anatomy, physiology, and the medical side of things was what got me interested in medicine to begin with.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so now that you go through Pepperdine in your 4 years. Actually, didn't you go down and do a study abroad in Australia?
Yeah, that's right. I spent a year in Australia. So Pepperdine was trying to initiate a program with the Australian Institute of Sport and the university there in Canberra, Australia. And so I went as a part of a group that sort of tested whether the classes and the coursework would be equivalent to what it would be in the U.S., and then sort of stayed for the first group of Pepperdine students to come to the program. So that really was my first international experience, and it was very memorable for me.
Do you think that had any kind of influence in terms of what you are today as it relates to your the way your mind wants to and has traveled abroad, your first real exposure to going overseas, and I mean, was that sense of adventure, is that where that kicked in? I
think it was part of it. Certainly when you're living in another country as opposed to just visiting or spending a summer, et cetera, that you sort of appreciate what's different about this culture versus your own. And Australia certainly isn't some exotic location, but it was different enough for me to start thinking about those things that were exciting to me as far as experiencing outside of my own kind of comfort zone.
Okay, so now you come back, right, and you graduate from PEP. And what was the next step for you?
So remarkably, with it being on the beach and so forth, I made it to medical school from Pepperdine. So I did apply to medical school and was accepted in Chicago. So that was my next step, was moving to the Midwest from Malibu, California. I always say it's been all downhill since Malibu.
Well, Chicago's not too bad. It's just freezing, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah,
right.
you get those cold temperatures. So you're talking about the Chicago School of Medicine.
Right. Chicago Med, right.
Chicago Med. Okay, so now you're there for 4 years. And are you doing a general practice at this point?
Well, in medical school, there's a core curriculum that every student has to take. So you're exposed to every clinical rotation, pediatrics, internal medicine, all of the specialties. You have to go through rotations in each of those. So you're exposed to all of the types of medicine to try to make the decision about where you'll focus in your internship and residency.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you go through that, you're in Chicago, and now you've narrowed the focus because you've gone through all these different rotations. So where does the whole cardiothoracic specialty come in? Where does that kick? And the reason why I want to talk about that, again, let's go back to the beginning where, there's lots of female doctors out there, but I think your particular choice in that profession is, I don't know, you probably know the numbers, the percentages more than I do, but it's a pretty small percentage. You're kind of living in a guy's world as it relates to that niche, right?
Sure, absolutely. So 3% of cardiothoracic surgeons are female, and most of them only do, or at least a majority of them, usually focus on lung surgery, but to do heart and lung surgery is in the minority.
Yeah. Okay. So now you decide that that's where you want to go, and where do you apply, and where do you end up getting accepted into?
Yeah. So for medical school, you have to first do a internship and residency in general surgery. So again, you have to kind of get all of the basics. So that's 5 years. I knew that I wanted to be in a surgical specialty because, I like to solve problems. I like to identify challenges and overcome them. So I knew that a surgical specialty was for me. So I have 5 years to make the decision about heart surgery. So within those 5 years, I just couldn't find anything that was cooler than heart surgery to me. I mean, yeah. The technical ability, the level of acuity, the sort of esprit de corps of the team you're working with. It's, a lot of specialists that, of course, have to be involved with something as involved as stopping and starting the heart. And so there was just a unique attraction, I would say, to that field for me. And then it was just amplified by the opportunity to affect people's lives really profoundly each day. So
from Chicago, where did you end up?
So I did my 5 years of general surgery at the Ochsner Clinic in New Orleans.
Okay. And how was that? So now you're going
change
from
of gear.
Yeah, so now you're going from Malibu, crazy down the beach, Annette Funicello, the whole gang, right? To Chicago, and it's cold and it's freezing there, but you're getting this great education. And then you bounce down to New Orleans, which, as you know, I lived down there for a couple of years.
Right.
And so I understand, it's a wonderful place for food and drink, but if you're not into all that stuff, it just
debauchery.
Yeah, so it gets a little crazy down there. But what was that like for you?
Well, surgical residency in general is quite intense. There's been some changes that have been made in recent years, but in general, it's you're working 100-hour weeks, so it's a pretty intensive 5 years of your life, and so there's not really a lot of time for that music and food and debauchery on the outside. So it's a lot of focus and preparing yourself for either going into a field of general surgery or to subspecialize in something like heart surgery, which was the direction I was headed. So
when I was down there, I lived with a buddy of mine, Brian Carey, who's now an eye surgeon in Seattle. And so he was going to Tulane and going through these crazy rotations, right? And it just blew my mind that he was actually in there doing these different rotations and surgeries and working 100-hour weeks, and that these are the people that are operating on people like me. You're so fried.
Well, they're supervised, of course, by...
No, I get that, but it's just, you're so fried, right?
Sure.
So it makes no sense to me.
Which is why a lot of modifications and some softening of the requirements have been made in recent years.
Yeah. Okay, so you do that, and then what's your next stop?
So my next stop was applying to train in heart surgery, and I was fortunate to be accepted at Yale. So that was my next stop, is New Haven, Connecticut.
Oh man! So I have been in New Haven, and I was there with my daughter Amelia, who is visiting some schools last year for possible volleyball scholarship. And as we drove in there, she said, that place looks like Hogwarts, which is great. And it did. It's this beautiful old, it looks like it was from the 18th century, stone castle, as you drive in. And it must have just been so inspiring being on that campus.
Yeah, I've got to tell you, you feel like you gain like 20 IQ points when you walk around there. I mean, it's just filled with people that just have brilliance of, unbelievable capacity. And not only that, it's an exciting kind of sort of compelling place to be, because there's just so many amazing things going on around you. Now, again, I was working even more than the 100 hours a week, so it's not like I was, sitting in some lounge pontificating with, scholars. I was busy in the hospital working and operating.
Well, you mentioned that because as I stopped and I jumped out of the car and I went into a Starbucks with Amelia, and I felt like the straw man on the Wizard of Oz, right? It's like, ask me questions and I can solve math problems suddenly. It just all came into me. So I understand. You just kind of feel like you're part of the smart crowd,
right?
So no, that's really cool. So okay, so then where do you go? I mean, where is this all leading to? So now we've been in school for about 12 years, right?
Longer than that, right? If you count, 4 years of college, right?
Yep.
4 years of med school, that's 8. 5 years of residency, that's 13. And now 2 years of fellowship in cardiothoracic surgery, so that's 15.
So are you at the end of the rope before you...
Yes.
Before they...
Finally, I can become an adult.
Okay, cool. Yeah, rack up a lot of debt, and that's just the way that goes. But okay, so I think one of the things that's really amazing about what you do is, and I want you to talk about it just a little bit, is did you start off as a full-time surgeon?
I did. So when you finish your fellowship, then you're called an attending surgeon. You're the boss. The buck stops with you. And so my first position was at St. Louis University as an assistant professor of surgery. Yeah,
and I think we've talked about this before, where you go in there, you are literally the quarterback, and it's a probably unique thing to a lot of different surgeons in that there's 20 people around you, or 20 other professionals, right? They all have different roles, and you really need to be the one leading and integrating and working with the team to make sure that this patient has a successful outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt you're the captain of that ship. However, every person is a professional and an expert in their field, whether it's the person that the perfusionist is called who runs the heart-lung machine, or the anesthesiologist, or even the people that are circulating in the room to provide the equipment that you need. I mean, everyone's critical to the outcome of that patient. And that's what I mean when I refer to the esprit de corps. You have this group of individuals who are kind of, in the trenches with you, and everyone's got to be on their game. It doesn't matter if I do a perfect operation. If someone else, isn't contributing what they need to, it affects the outcome of the patient. So
I want to jump over just for a minute to your humanitarian, and then I want to come back to the stuff that you do in the doctor world. Because there's a great tie, and I want to understand better, like, where this kicked in. So you and we're going to get into this in a minute, but your humanitarian stuff that you do. So where did that kick in? What that means to everybody that's out there listening is that Emily travels to these other remote, mostly third world places around the globe, and she goes in for a week or so and operates, volunteers, to some of the most incredible environments in terms of non-modern medical equipment. And it's kind of like MacGyver, you're in there, and I know you've had some crazy experiences, which we'll talk about. But where did that kick in? Yeah, so between my first and second years of medical school, actually, I joined a group called Operation Crossroads Africa. And so it was a group of medical folks who went to Kenya and Tanzania and Uganda and basically provided basic medical care. So I delivered my first baby in Kenya. Wow. And so, that's kind of when my eyes were opened that,
medicine and all of its grandeur doesn't transcend the socioeconomic status of a country. And how do you know that if you're not exposed to it? And I wish every medical student or trainee would be exposed to that kind of perspective, because it really changes who you are.
So did you sign up to start going around the world at that time, or you were exposed, and then how did that get triggered?
Right. So that was just my first exposure. And during my fourth year of medical school, I went to Sri Lanka and kind of did some surgical cases there. I mean, things that were, crazy, like taking a spleen out because someone was laying underneath a palm tree where a coconut fell on their side, or, things that obviously we'd never see in the United States. And again, it kind of put that idea in my mind that medicine is this skill set that I can take anywhere and that I can potentially make a difference with. And so I had plenty of training, right? We've already gone over that, so plenty of training ahead of me. So I wasn't really at the point where I could contribute yet. But as soon as I finished my fellowship at Yale, I just found a nonprofit organization that was doing heart surgery overseas that I could join up with. And I did it immediately and made it a part of my career at a very young age, which is not as common as many other physicians.
Yeah. So let's jump back into the doctor world. Okay. I know it's all tied together, but so what is the name? Because I'm not going to try to pronounce this because I will hack it up. But what is the name that is given to surgeons who parachute in for a couple of weeks and then they can go live wherever they want, right? What is the name of that?
You mean in the United States they can live wherever they want, but they go to these locations to provide free heart surgery?
No. Where you're actually working. In your case, you work down and you have a hospital that you work with
Sure.
down in Appleton, Wisconsin, right? But you live in Manhattan Beach, California.
Correct.
Right. So rather than be a full time around the clock.
I see what you mean. Yeah, it's called locum tenens. So it's a type of physician employment that is not a permanent position like a normal practice that you're accustomed to. So you take assignments based on the need or based on your flexibility of when you want to work and where you want to work, et cetera.
Right. So this is the whole kick where your story becomes so fascinating to me, which is that's exactly what you have done. That's what you have committed for your life, where you've done two things. Number one, you have signed up in a way that you can go and you can be in Appleton, Wisconsin, and working and doing the medical care in that community at that hospital. And then the other 2 weeks is your choice to go do whatever you want to do. And in your case, what you've chosen to do is go around the world and serve these other people on your own nickel, saving lives, which is just, a miracle to me. So it's amazing. And I just want to read off some of these different places that she's been: Mongolia, Vietnam, Russia, Peru, Brazil, Ecuador, Nepal, Haiti, Honduras, Kenya, Uganda, I already said Kenya. Nigeria. You just got back from Nigeria. So, I mean, it's a fascinating lifestyle, and I know you've probably had crazy experiences. You shared with me not too long ago I think it was a video where, and it was funny to me, especially because from your perspective as a doctor, for you to open up a chest and, to see the blood and guts and everything else. I mean, it's just not a big deal to you. And you're going, hey, you got to check out this video. Or it was pictures where somebody had been stabbed and it was a huge sword and it had gone through this guy's chest, and it was just so fascinating to you guys because you were able to take it out and the guy didn't die and he just missed all the right organs, and it was just amazing like that. And that's not a United States thing, right?
No, that was in the Amazon. So, yeah, there were two men that were in the jungle using one of those swords, so to speak, to cut down the brush, and they got into an argument, and one stabbed the other. So,
which is the right way to settle an argument, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Although he wasn't totally effective, since we were able to remove the knife, and it just skived the heart, so it wasn't a few centimeters in one or the other direction, and it would have been the end.
Incredible. And I know that's just like the tip of the iceberg on some of these different things. So you just got back from Nigeria.
That's right.
Right? And you've been down there a couple times.
This is my fourth or fifth time.
Yeah. And the one thing that's really cool about Emily going to Nigeria is that they've actually named her as a tribal chief. And her name down there is Akonko.
A conco.
A conco. That's it, which means gifted hands, which is beautiful. And so, tell me about the ceremony around what that has meant to them of you saving lives, going in. I mean, that must be, as a woman, as a foreigner, to be deemed a tribal chief must be a huge deal for those people.
Oh, it's certainly an honor for me. So back in 2013, no surgery had been done in Nigeria, no heart surgery in over 10 years for different reasons. And the University of Nigeria Teaching Hospital is where we went to try to initiate a program so that somewhere in all of Nigeria, that of 250 million people, that there would be a place where heart surgery could be performed and provided. So we took a team there, and I was blessed to be able to do the first operation in that setting. And so because of that, they sort of had this celebration with diplomats and government representatives, et cetera, and in honor of a female doing the first surgery, they announced at this get-together that while men normally eat before women, that the women were going to eat first at this event, which I thought for certain was going to be an international incident because complete silence fell amongst the crowd. But I stood up and women started following me and cheering, and it's not like it's a Rosa Parks moment, but it was quite moving for me.
Well, look, it's such an inspiration for anybody to be in your position, let alone being a female, let alone being in a probably very male-dominated society, right?
Sure.
And then you've overcome a lot of these things, and then you become a very big inspiration to those women within that village, and maybe one day one of those women will become a surgeon.
Well, I hope so. And certainly many of the countries that I go to, I often will speak to groups of, younger women or even high school kids, or, just to let them know what's possible and at least hopefully to inspire.
Yeah, that's great. Let's shift over to another country. I know that you and I both have a love of mountain climbing, and you've been to Nepal several times, right?
Yes.
And so let's talk about what happened a couple of years ago when they had that massive earthquake, and you decided you were in a position where you could leave, and you wanted to go help. It wasn't necessarily in your field in terms of heart surgery, but it was just they needed massive medical help, right?
Yeah, it started even sooner than that. So my first trip to Nepal was with a group affiliated with the Himalayan Rescue Association, and it was a certification in altitude and mountain medicine rather, up to the place where the Everest ER is, which is just above base camp. And so that was an amazing experience. But what struck me about that while I was in Nepal was they have so much exposure to affluence with the trekking and the mountaineering industries, right? So that's very different from most places I go to that are underdeveloped. But they have this exposure to affluence, and yet they have so little. And healthcare is one of those things. And it struck me that at that time, which was many years ago, that I wanted to come back and do something in my field of heart surgery. And so several years later, Kathmandu University had reached out to our organization and asked if we could help them start a program. And so that was my desire to come back to Nepal and do heart surgery. And so it was a great opportunity. Now, the first mission, so to speak, we had set up happened to be 5 days after the earthquake, which ultimately claimed 9,000 lives. So we had a whole team of people ready to come. Of course, we were going to do heart surgery, but that wasn't what the need was. The need was relieve these clinicians who were, working day and night like a MASH unit outside. It was just a war zone, really, without enemies. And half of the staff had either had their homes and or family or friends just killed in this disaster. And so they just asked us, please come and please help. And so we just came and did what we could to relieve them and to provide some support and assistance.
So how does that happen? You land and it's just complete chaos, right? We're seeing this right now in Mexico City, and buildings have crumbled, and there's cracks in the street and the infrastructure. And, how do they assign you where to go and who to treat? You've got all these skills because that's what you learned going through medical school. How do they plug you in?
Yeah, that's a great question because there really isn't anyone to plug you in. I mean, you have a group of colleagues who you have had contact with in preparation for this heart surgery mission, but, no one's got time to stand around and worry about what you're doing. I mean, you basically just have to assess what's going on and then contribute where you can. And that means it's totally outside of, what you're normally doing in your hospitals back home. And so if it was, literally could be anything from moving patients outside because we had the whole hospital outside because there were aftershocks that were just so dramatic that it shook the structure of the hospital that we were working at. And so we had the entire hospital outside. So something from doing that to, suturing wounds, to stabilizing a fracture, to, it was just the whole spectrum. Whatever was needed to be done, you just had to do it. And that's really the kind of adaptability you need for a situation like that.
Have you felt any kind of prejudice for being a woman? Again, going back into your medical profession where you're the quarterback when you walk in, and I'm sure there's a lot of male teammates, that are below you, not as qualified, or you're overseas. And again, a lot of these are very male-dominated countries. Sure.
So you mean as I'm overseas, not while I'm in the U.S.?
Well, probably both.
Yeah. So, of course, starting my career in the U.S. and being in a male-dominated field, I think I would say overwhelmingly it was a non-factor for me, which I'm really grateful for, and I'm not sure that every woman has that experience. But I just felt like I was surrounded by people who were so supportive and so just willing to accept me for who I was that I was really, really fortunate. Now, this won't be popular among other females, I think, but I also think that women sometimes create a situation where it's difficult for them to fit in, so to speak, in our field. So, they feel like they need to overreact, or they need to raise their voice, or they need to overcompensate, so to speak, so that they are recognized as an authoritative figure. And I feel bad for those women because I feel like it's not always necessary. And in fact, I feel like I don't really have to do that at all because I think that, there's a time to stand out, right? There's a time to be a stiletto in a room full of flats, literally. And then there's a time to just do your job and do it well and not give people reason to reflect on why you're different than the guy next to you. And I think navigating that and figuring out when is the right time to conduct yourself in the right way is a skill that I think every woman in a male-dominated field needs to master.
Yeah, I think part of that too is about being secure with yourself.
Sure.
And you're very gifted and you're very talented, and so I'm sure you can hold your own against many of these people. So for that reason, you don't have to necessarily carry a big stick and stand up and scream and yell and everything else like that because they already respect you for who you are. But on the flip side of that, there's just always those people out there that I'm sure that no matter what you do, what you say, how smart you are, how skilled you're going to be, are still going to hold that prejudice against just because you're a certain race or gender, right?
Sure. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm certain it's out there. I don't know if I've just been, again, I think I've just been fortunate. So it's not like a number of different scenarios come to my mind. But, there's things as benign as walking into a room with a, 85-year-old man who asks if, you can get him a newspaper or a, hot tea, honey, because they would never imagine that this female was the one that was going to open his chest and stop his heart. So, I'll get them the tea and the newspaper, and then I'll start telling them about how I'm going to stop and start their heart. And I don't feel any need to, malign them because they don't recognize that I'm the surgeon. I mean, they'll learn when it's time, and they respect each individual that's taking care of them once they learn sort of the role that everyone's in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, it's amazing, again, how you've tied in your lifestyle with, it's a sacrifice, right? I mean, it's a sacrifice from the standpoint of you're not in Manhattan Beach that often, and you've made choices to accommodate your humanitarian. And to me, you really lead with that. And so that's kind of plugged in, reverse engineered how you have this other gig, part-time gig in Appleton, Wisconsin, population 100,000, right? and just outside of Green Bay, Wisconsin. But it's a choice, and life's about a choices, and you really are there to serve others. So let's talk about some of the things that serve yourself versus others, which is more your adventurous self. I know those are adventures in terms of going to all these different countries, but you're certainly have taken on now 3 of the world's top peaks on the continents. One is Elbrus in Russia, which you got off last summer, and one is Kilimanjaro. Mm-hmm. And the other one would be Mount Kosciuszko, right? Which that can be a debatable one, but I've been up it. It's a fun. I always call that the fun 7. But so what is your drive about mountain climbing? What do you like about it? I just think it's the most mentally and physically at the same time challenges that I've ever come across, and it appealed to me initially because I just knew nothing about it. It was like this entire world that was totally just foreign to me. And as I started learning about it more, and I always enjoy challenges and seek them, it just seemed like something I wanted to accomplish, and whether it be one mountain or 7 or 20. And so my first trip was in the Andes in Ecuador, Cotopaxi and Cambay, which are both around 20,000 feet, a little over, and that was jumping right in, and I was fascinated with kind of the, not just the altitude medicine side of it, just the adaptations that your body makes and the way you recognize them or don't recognize them. But that was all fascinating to me. But personally, it was just about, finding your limits and kind of pushing yourself to surpass them. So this last summer you were in Russia, right? Which is where Mount Elbrus is. I've done that mountain. What did you like about that mountain? Well, I liked that it was, it wasn't, you didn't have to camp out all of the time. As you know, on many of these locations, you have to carry all of your gear to camp and so forth. And they have, I don't remember, some kind of hut. I don't know what the right terminology is. Certainly in Russian, I don't know. Yeah, it was a hut. Right. Yeah. And so that kind of breaks up the climb, so to speak, and you don't have to carry so much gear, which of course makes it more difficult, as you know, when you get to the higher altitudes. So, it was a beautiful mountain. It was certainly, it's something special to be on top of a continent, as you know and have experienced. And I just feel like it's there's no other feeling like it when you reach that summit. Yeah, I got to tell you, it was a crazy, like 12 hours we were on the mountain. We woke up in a just an absolute beautiful sunrise, and we're going up the mountain. And as we got kind of higher up, this is on summit day, we ran into just a brutal storm, and it was a whiteout, and we could only see about 10 feet in front of us, and it was one step after the other when we finally got to the top. And you're talking about, I think you hit it. I saw some pictures where you've got a nice, clear, you're overlooking the Caucasus Mountains, and just intense, just in terms of the scenery. And there was, all you could see it was just white, right? That's all it was. Look, it's the real thing. That mountain's no joke. It's not Denali and it's not Everest, but it's every bit of the altitude and the downside of having that hut that we talked about, as you know, Mark, is that the summit day is, like you said, it's 12, 13 hours plus, depending on what your weather conditions are like. So we did get lucky, but we, didn't trim off any of the hours as far as the investment. So yeah, it's the real thing. Yeah. On the way down, we got in an electrical storm, and we were literally in the source of this storm. And normally, you're down on ground and you look up and you see a lightning strike, you go, "Hey, Mom, there's a lightning strike," and it comes down to earth, and we were actually in that source, up around probably about 16,000 feet, and there's somebody who actually got struck and died, and it was awful, and everybody was running for their lives, and unfortunately, you're so high up there's no tree line, as you know, sure, and so you can't hide, you're exposed. That's right. So it's just kind of like every man for himself, and just get back to the hut ASAP, so you can eliminate some of that danger. But that was my experience. But I think just, so much about what you're talking about from the humanitarian side to the mountain climbing side, being in Australia for yourself, in Tanzania with Kilimanjaro, and now in Russia, it's not as much about the summit, although it is for me, but when else would I be in Russia? Right? Because I'm not doing heart surgery, right? So it to me, it's been such a fascinating and I'm sure you agree, of getting to know the people, the other teammates on the climb, and just the different cultures. And what you find out is that we're basically all the same. It's just these governments get things screwed up and create conflict, and it's just it's I don't know. To me, it's inspiring to see the other side. And as you know, this last year, I was down in Tanzania, and we're building water wells for the Maasai tribe, and you've been down there. And again, it's just it's interesting when you travel in that environment, and people are they have so little, but they have so much. And talk about the happiness factor. Their currency is a goat. Right? Right. It's not about the car and the house and all this stuff. I mean, it's just amazing what they live in, dirt floors and bugs everywhere, and they're just happy. And so I don't know, it's just put my whole life in a different perspective in terms of the way I approach it, the way I see things. And to me, it's been because of this journey that I've been on, and you've been on it longer than I've been on it. And so that's why I know that, your path has been so special in terms of what you've been able to do, and you continue to be committed to, I know these mountains, but really this humanitarian, which is an ongoing thing for you. So how many trips do you do per year on the humanitarian side?
Yeah, so it's every 6 or 8 weeks. So I think I've done 6 so far this year. So it'll end up being, maybe 7 or 8 trips per year. They're usually a week to 2 weeks in length. Yeah. And then I allow myself one mountain a year as my fun.
And what's your next one?
Next will probably be Aconcagua, but that would make the most sense. I'm more drawn to Vinson in Antarctica, but we'll see time-wise. Well,
maybe I can talk you into Denali next May.
That's right. I forgot that's on your docket. Yeah.
It is on my docket. I have to go back, but this last year, you were the medic. Down in the Baja race. So right. It seems like as a doctor, there's always a need for, they're going to have a crazy race and they need a medic, and you happen to be available, right? And so you made that happen. So what is that like to be in this? I know that you started in LA and you road tripped all the way down there, and you came back and you had all these crazy experiences and flat tires and people crashing and sleeping in this tent car thing you had going on. What was that like?
Yeah, so this was, I've been an expedition medic in other circumstances, but this was my first off-road rally. So this was actually called the Bamako. It was a amateur off-road rally that began in Europe and Africa. And so, in fact, that's where I'll be next January, the one that starts in Budapest and ends in Gambia. And there's 8 countries in between, I believe. So this one was the first time they'd done it in Baja, so they started in LA and drove all the way down the peninsula and back up. It was a little over 4,000 kilometers. And, look, if you can find a way to match up your personal and professional desires, then that's all the better. And something like this that was kind of adventure-driven, nothing I'd done like that before, and be able to have the skills to contribute to that event was a nice combination for me. So it was, it was exciting. It was unexpected. It was, we had to be ready for everything from scorpion bites to, major car accidents out in the middle of nowhere where there's no one there to help. So I have a little bit, of course, background in, like you said, MacGyvering things and making things work, but we just didn't quite know what to expect.
And do you take your leopard on these road trips?
No. No, I think she'd be, 1,000 miles gone if I tried to bring her on something like that.
Escape. Okay, I got that. Okay. Well, listen, Emily, it's been a pleasure and inspiration to hear your story, to share it with everybody. It's just, you're a beautiful person, and, you have a life commitment towards helping others. And it's very purpose-driven, and that's very admirable to anybody who. Well, I think it's fantastic, right? It's just kudos to you, and it's just an amazing thing that you've done. So congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mark.
Yeah. So okay. Well, thank you for being on the pod, and good luck in the future.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, this is Mark, and thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast this week. We had another great guest, and it is so awesome to continually have these different people on, talk about their different adversity, how they've overcome that, and what they've done to affect change in their life to become very successful. So, really appreciate you guys tuning in. So, as always, we love the rating and reviews that you guys do on iTunes. If you haven't done that, please go do that. It really helps us in terms of increasing our visibility within Apple iTunes. And anyways, it's just fun to share the love and what these different stories, these different people are all about. So make sure you tune in next week. We appreciate it. And that's it. Bye.